Welcome back to the Rocky Garza Show. I'm your host, Rocky Garza, and today we are diving into our longest running methodology that we've had for over a decade. Has brought tens of thousands of individuals the clearest language about who they have ever had. And we're going to walk through what this process is, how it operates, and what you can do to begin to find a greater level of clarity for yourself in who you are, which we believe has a direct impact on what you do. Before we get started, I want to remind you, as always, make sure if you are somebody who is a high achiever looking to see what is beyond success, if you're a business owner who is going, hey, I'm growing and I'm seeing it and I'm finding the fruit of having a great business, but surely there is something other than just quote unquote having a great business. If you are an individual, if you are a people leader, if you are an executive who is saying, look, I know that I've done what I can do within my capacity, but at this point, I got to unpack this great life myth there is and really figure out what my life really needs to be so that I can move beyond success. And I want to encourage you, make sure you go to rockygarza.com/beyond success. Again, that's rockygarza.com/beyond success, where you can check out there our very next event we have coming up, free of charge for you. We would love to have you there. All you need to do is register, but that link is live for you right now, rockygarza.com/beyond success, where you too can see how do you sort of discover and look in our Beyond Success system to figure out what are the methodologies required in order to build a life of deep conviction, where we can see a deeply meaningful life and a wildly impactful career collide together and create a life you actually want. That's rockygarza.com/beyond success. Today we are looking at identity mapping. Now, if you're hearing this for the first time and you're unfamiliar with identity mapping, no worries, be encouraged. We have been utilizing identity mapping for over a decade, and this is a process that I built about a decade ago, and it's been refined over the course of the last 10 years that really allows us to get through four main components of understanding ourselves. Now, I want to be very clear, identity mapping is not a way for Rocky to tell you who you are. Rather, identity mapping is a way for you to discover a language about who you are that I believe you already have. You just lack the ability to get it out. See, I think many people, if not almost every person I've ever met, does have a clear understanding of who they are, or at least they have a deep feeling and belief about who they are. They simply just lack the words to be able to communicate it. Let's start with this. Have you ever felt misunderstood? Those of you that are listening or watching now, have you ever felt misunderstood? And if the answer is yes, if you have ever felt misunderstood, I want to ask you this question. Is it because the person you're communicating to cannot understand you? Or is it because you are not communicating who you are in a way that is understandable? You see, oftentimes we are so quick to go, it's their fault that they don't get me, rather than initially taking ownership and saying, maybe it's on me to make sure I'm communicating it in a way that is understandable. So today we're going to explore, what is identity mapping? How could it help me create a framework? And what is the identity mapping process that allows me to discover and redefine, or maybe define for the first time, a language about who I am? When we think about identity mapping, we start with a process we like to call the upside down. See, the upside down allows us to understand a way in which our brain normally works, create a process called the upside down that sort of gives us the alternative way in which our brain could be working. And usually what it does is it allows us to then create a language for extended clarity about what actually is. See, I want you to think about it like this. I want to start with you asking yourself this question. What do you think about most? What do you think about most? And I want to start here. When we begin this way and we begin to unpack the upside down, number one, you're going to need to make sure that you're answering the question normally and honestly. Okay? I want you to make sure that you're going through and you're thinking about this. There's no pretense. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not trying to be something. I'm just asking you to think about you with you. What do you think about most? Okay, because I promise when we go through and we look at these questions, we're going to flip it around here in a second. You're going to be very surprised by what it is that you find. Okay? So as a human being, what do you think about most? Not just as a professional, not just as a parent or a friend or a partner or a cousin. I'm saying you as a human, what do you think about most? I just want you to think about the very first thing that comes to your mind, lock that in. If you're a note taker while you're listening or you're with us here on YouTube, then I want you to write it down. What do you think about most? And the reason we start here is because this tends to be, and this is not Rocky's opinion, this is proven, science and research shows us that what we think about is almost always a direct reflection of what our actions are doing. What we think about is almost always a direction of our focus, right? What we think about tends to be a direct reflection of what our focus is, and what our focus is tends to give us an idea of where our actions go. Let me say that to you again. What you think about most often is driving where your attention goes. Where your attention goes is where your focus goes, and where your focus goes tends to be where your actions go, and therefore what you think about most tends to be what you do most often. So I want you to ask this question. What do you think about most? It's the first part of understanding the upside down. Now, once you have this in your head and what it is that you think about most, then I want you to ask yourself, tell me about that. Tell me about that. What do we mean? So what do I think about most? And then tell me about that. And once you write that answer, then I want you to go, tell me about that. And then once you write that answer, I want you to say, tell me about that. That'll give us 3 chances to sort of dig in a little bit deeper. Okay? And the reason I want you to do that is because I want you to be able to say, hey, where am I at? What do I think about? Tell me about that. Tell me about that. Tell me about that. Now, what you're going to find is if you're willing to do this exercise, which again is totally up to you, you're going to find that you're a lot smarter and clearer than you think you are. What I mean by that is that you're going to find that as you work it down 2 or 3 or 4 times, you're going to get intensely more clarity about what that thing is. Now, here's how we get into the upside down. Here's how we learn this process. What we then begin to do is once we've broken it down 1, 2, 3, or 4 times, what I want you to do is I want you to then flip it around, and I want you to read it back to yourself in the opposite order. I want you to read it back to yourself in the opposite order, right? And here's what I mean. I'm just going to use this as an example. Let's say what you wrote down, what it is that you think about most is my to-do list and what I got to do next. Great answer. Tell me about that. Well, I feel like I have a lot to do and I have a lot of things I want to get done. And so I'm thinking about my to-do list and I'm thinking about getting all those things done because I don't want to miss anything. Okay, tell me about that. Well, I don't want to miss anything because I don't want to let anybody down. I want to make sure that people are taken care of. I want to do what I say I'm going to do, and I don't want people to be disappointed. One last time, tell me about that. I don't want people to be disappointed because I really hope that people see and trust that I am worthy and valuable in doing good work. Okay, great answer. All true. Now, let's take that and go into the upside down. What do you think about most? Being worthy and valuable. Because I don't want to be a disappointment to others and let them down. So I'm constantly thinking about what I need to do today and ultimately what's on my to-do list. You see what we did there? See what you did there? See, this is the upside down, and it works all over. We teach this method to tons and tons of people because we realize that our brain works very naturally. 1, 2, 3, it works in this order, and then we normally stop. Well, number one, we normally don't go past our very first answer, and if we're willing to give us 3, tell me about that, so when we get to the bottom, rarely do anything about that. And therefore, when we have the ability to sort of go through, we find ourselves and land on a place that goes, wait a second, now I have an immense more amount of clarity. Now, this is just an example of how the upside down works. In our identity mapping process, we actually go through 4 significant questions that we look at. We look at how our brain works, and we're looking at 4 different categories of the way we see things go together. We talk about how those are thoughts, fears, hopes, and dreams, and how those things fit and what they do, and it's an absolutely incredible process. But the first part of identity mapping is this, understanding how our brain works. What do we think about most naturally? What do we think about by default? What do we think about most often? And so I want to encourage you as you think about this process, as you think about and begin to understand identity mapping. For us, it's a key integral part. We call this section a get to know me section, but it's not for me to get to know you, it's for you to get to know you. We believe a key component of discovering a language for ourselves is our ability to be able to get to know ourselves first. And so we explore the upside down. As we move forward from there, we get into three other main components of identity mapping and begin to see and put all those things together. And so we're going to cover values, strengths, and identifiers in part 2 of this episode. We'll do that next week. We'll have identity mapping part 2 come out, but I want to explore the upside down with you just a little bit more. And I want to show you really how we utilize it and understanding how our brain works. Okay. Now we've done this on a few other podcasts, but we're going to do it on our own here for you to have a chance to see it. So here's really how I want you to think about the upside down. There's 4 main things we go through, and if you want to write these questions down, I would love for you to, okay? The first question is, what do you think about most? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, what 3 things in life do you fear losing most? Question number 3 is, if you could do 2 things the rest of your life and be totally satisfied, no rules, no restrictions, you have all the money you need, but you could only do 2 things, what are those 2 things? And question number 4 says, what is 1 thing in life you hope to accomplish? Now we ask these 4 questions and we ask them in this order, and we would just encourage you to write down your answers to all of them, because this is typically how our brain works. Whatever we think about most in number 1 is directly related to what we fear in number 2. What we fear in number 2 prevents us from doing number 3, and if we don't do number 3, we're never going to accomplish number 4. And so I want to encourage you to take some time and go through and just answer these 4 questions. It can be immensely clarifying for you to take some time to get to know yourself and go, what are those things? What do I think about? What does that mean? As we think through our thoughts, fears, hopes, and dreams, you will find as you go through this, and if you ever have the opportunity to experience identity mapping with us, one thing you will find as you go through the 4 questions and recognize and understand and utilize the upside down is that oftentimes we think in this order, thoughts, fears, hopes, and dreams, because we are by default very reactive creatures. See, we tend to think about life reactively. I find that most often that you are looking at life reactively. You are living life on your heels, playing defense, trying to keep the bad things away, as opposed to attempting to posture yourself such that you can play life on your toes on offense. See, it's hard to score points on defense. I would even go as far to say you can't score points on defense. The only thing you ever do on defense is the prevention of somebody else scoring points on you. Now, for those of you that want to argue and tell me, well, that on a football and you get an interception, the defense scores, I think that's false. I think the moment you get the ball in your hand, you become offense because the other team immediately begins to try to stop you from scoring. See, many of us are not where we want to be. We have not identified yet how to live life beyond success because we live most of our days reactively. You live reactively. You wake up every morning and you hit the snooze button and you don't get up when you say you're going to, and you have 3 different alarms, and then when you do, you grab your phone, you check all of your things, you react to the world, and then within the first 10 minutes of every day, you have reacted to all of the things that are occurring rather than proacting your way into the world that you want to create. And I'm not even talking about having a 19-hour morning routine. I'm not talking about cold plunging. I'm not talking about getting up and doing 30 minutes or 30 grams of protein within the first 30 minutes of waking up at steady state cardio. I'm not talking about it. You can do any and all of those things that you want to do. I'm saying part of the reason you are not building the life you desire is because you are unwilling to begin to proact into your day, and rather you would react into your day. And the upside down begins to challenge that thought and that idea that am I reacting or am I proacting? Am I reacting to things around me, or am I proactively living into what it is that I believe and I want? I'm not saying you're going to do it perfectly. I'm not saying you can't make mistakes. I'm not saying that there's not a constant reiteration of the things that you're doing and where you're going. My marriage today is not what it was 15 years ago. My children today are not who they were 6 and 8 years ago. I am not the parent today that I was 5 years ago. There is growth, there is change, there is adaptation, but there must be a level of proactivity in the pursuit of good rather than simply the defense of bad. What are you protecting yourself from? And what are you preventing yourself from pursuing? I know that it can be difficult. I know that life can life. My challenge is not to somehow show up in a superior way to tell you to, quote unquote, get it together, friend. But get it together, friend. What are you chasing? What are you protecting yourself from? We're going to pursue here over the next few episodes. We're going to dive into part 2 of identity mapping. We're going to look at the imposter within. We're going to look through a process to discover and uncover this deep level of belief system and who we are. And so I am imploring you today to stop and to pause. And before you get caught up in defending all the reasons why what I'm saying is wrong or right or good or bad, go back to what we talked about last week. Give yourself space, foster vulnerability, invest in yourself, pursue purposeful goals, and most importantly, go to the upside down. Ask yourself what you think about most. Ask yourself what it is that you want and break it down and down and down and down, and then go to the upside down, read it the other way, and see what you could discover. You are capable of so much more than you give yourself credit for. I think it's time for you. It's time for you to begin to take yourself seriously. It's time for you to stop reacting to life and start being proactive in your approach to what you want. It's time to create some space away from that in which you must protect yourself from. It's time for you to foster vulnerability and create the opportunity to see and be seen by others. It is time for you to invest in yourself. And most importantly, it is time for you to believe that you are worthy and valuable of pursuing purposeful goals. You are capable of everything you believe you are, but you will not accomplish it as long as you continue to lose yourself in hopes that somebody else finds you. As always, I appreciate you being a part of this with us. We would love to see you at our next event. You can go to rockygarza.com/beyond success. Again, that's rockygarza.com/beyond success to check out what we are doing, where we are going. We would love to have you at our next event. If we can ever serve you or help you, please don't hesitate to reach out. So appreciate you being here, and we'll talk to you soon.